Hi, everyone.
Evening.
I was going to say, let's do a quick sound test that somebody's doing for me already. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Very well,
Great.
thanks.
Got Janelle, Martin Bruton.
Hello, Hakumu Dave.
Who is that? Is that
It's Joanne.
Joanne? Yeah, I can see you now. Yes.
Yeah, hey.
Thank you very much.
It's morning here.
We'll be joining a live from The Hague in the Netherlands. The latest on the Invictus game. Have a look at it. She's been very lucky with the weather.
She's done all right.
People could have their microphones muted because I'm just hearing a broadcast from about the Invicta game. Steph, hi. Linda, hi. Elma, hello. As you can see, we're doing a slightly different setup because I want to use the flip chart today, so can't really do that in my dining room. So welcome to my library. But then obviously to get the flip chart in and all that kind of stuff, then the computer needed to be a little bit further away than it normally is. So I'm watching everybody arrive on my iPad, which is why if you look in the list, I will actually appear twice. But one of me is invisible. I'm not telling you which one though. How are we doing on letting people in?
Everybody's in.
Good. So there's a few more people arriving. So just a bit of housekeeping. Session 4 on perceptions projection. We've got even more people in the Real World and HUNA group. Now I think we're about 360 members strong. Susan Warren from Australia, welcome. And I'm going to say the same thing I normally do. We're going to run for about 30 minutes. The last one wound up being more like an hour. I'm going to take time for Q&A at the end of the session. I know we've had some questions in from last week's session. They're going to be added to the Q&A for today's session. And if you could just make sure that your microphones are muted so that we don't have disturbance as far as that's concerned. Hi, Pippa. This week's perception is projection. What I want to cover is how it relates to NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I know many of you are trained in, and how NLP explains perceptions projection, but also from an NLP point of view, what it is that we actually project, which is why I wanted to have the flip chart there. And something that brought it to top of mind for me just this afternoon, actually, is that I started doing a breakthrough session with a client of mine in California. So obviously we're doing it virtually because I'm still in London. And one of the first things I cover with a client is the NLP communications model and how it relates to personal transformation and how it relates to us letting go of what we don't want and getting what we do want. So it's really top of mind for me at the moment. So I thought, what a great extension to our perceptions projection masterclasses that we're doing. So, and what you're about to discover is why I am a master trainer of NLP and not an artist. because I'm going to draw my version of the NLP communications model. I mean, we're not going to go through this from the total NLP communications model, because from a perceptions projection point of view, we don't really need all of the NLP communications model. I know some of you understand it. I just want to go through the parts of the NLP communications model from a perception is projection perspective, and actually how the NLP communications model explains why perception is projection. Welcome to those new people that are joining. I think some new people that are joining. If you could mute your microphone. So here we go. Here's your first experience of David Shepherd, the person that isn't an artist. It's not really working well. Okay. Things were working well this afternoon when I was working with my client. So that's a drawing of a Neanderthal, which is about as good as you're going to get as me drawing somebody's head. And as you know from the NLP communications model, I've got wires all over the place here. Then we've got this here, which is the external event. Information coming in from the external event through our 5 senses, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. And some of you might have actually studied the NLP communications model quite a while ago. And we used to say that there were 2 million bits of information arriving every single second, which, is a lot of information anyway. Advances in neuroscience now would say that we are receiving as much as 12 million bits of information every second through our sensors. So 12 times 10 to the power 6 bits per second. 10 million through our eyes, and another 2 million through our hearing and through feelings, smells, and tastes. Now, how do you get your conscious mind around receiving 12 million bits of information per second? Well, your conscious mind can't really conceive of that. So let's just put it in a different perspective. Here's my iPhone. It's a 64 gigabyte iPhone. And if we were to put information onto an iPhone at the rate that you're receiving information, my iPhone would be full in less than an hour. And you've been receiving that amount of information every single second you've been alive. Fortunately, your nervous system has a significantly higher storage capacity than my iPhone. So even though you've been receiving that amount of information and storing that information, you're nowhere near full. So you're not going to need to get upgraded soon, from a neurological point of view. Now, because we can't cope consciously with 12 million bits of information per second. So our unconscious mind this is the unconscious mind here. Our unconscious mind filters that information. So what it does is it deletes information. It distorts information. And it generalizes. That information. So if we were to look at this in a little bit more detail, the way that a person's unconscious mind deletes, distorts, generalizes information is it filters through our beliefs, or what some people call our rules, the things that we believe to be true or not true. It filters through our values, the things that are most important to us, our unconscious drivers in life. It filters through what we call in NLP metaprograms. Which are some of the broadest ranging filters that we have. In NLP, we say that they're content-free filters in that beliefs have content, like I'm not good enough, as an example. Values have content, as in what's most important to be in a relationship, love. So there's content, but metaprograms don't have any content. And they are still a filter. We also filter through language in that the client I was working with today is multilingual. And I asked him the question, you know, do you notice that the world is a different place depending which language you're thinking in? And he said, absolutely, absolutely it is. Whereas most people think of language as being a means of communication, it's actually also a means of filtering from an NLP point of view. We also filter through our emotions. And we filter through our memories. And this is all taking place at the unconscious level before we create what we call an NLP. Our internal representation or internal representations. So here's the thing with this from an NLP point of view. What most people believe they are currently experiencing, like for instance what you're experiencing right now, people believe that they're experiencing this, the external event. But you're not. What you're actually experiencing right now is your internal representation of the event. So the only way that we can experience an external event is post-filtering. This is what we're aware of with our conscious mind. Yeah. All of this takes place unconsciously. Now, this is how it ties in to perception is projection. Firstly, let's look at the word perception. So Carl Jung said all that we have of an event or another person, situation or circumstance is a perception of that person, a perception of that event, a perception of that situation or circumstance. And that's what we've got here. We've got the person, this event, situation or circumstance out here. We then filter it, and then the internal representation is your perception. So the way that our nervous system is wired, we can't actually have anything other than a perception, which is what we said in a couple of the other sessions, is that there is no such thing as an objective reality, just a subjective reality. So this here, the internal representation from an NLP point of view, is your perception. Now, from a perception projection point of view, what we do is, whereas NLP is very much a outside-in model, perception is projection is an inside-out model. So what we're actually projecting onto those people, events, situations, circumstances is, from an NLP perspective, our filters. So we project out our beliefs, whether they're empowering beliefs or disempowering beliefs. We project out our values, whether they be towards values, things we want to move towards, things we want to have, or whether they're away from values. We project out our metaprograms. We even project our language. We project our emotions, whether they be positive emotions or negative emotions. And we project out our previous experiences of our memories. And then they're reflected back and become our internal representation, our perception. So this is what we're projecting. This is what we're perceiving. So the great thing about this, as I was saying with my breakthrough client today, is there's many things that we think that are out here, which are the problem and are outside of our control. There's nothing we can do about them. But in actual fact, it's all happening in here. So it doesn't really actually matter what's happening out here, because it's this that we experience. And this, using things like NLP, using things like timeline therapy, using things like hypnosis, and using things like HUNA, enable us to change our internal representation and therefore actually change our experience of what we previously believed was the external event. So the great thing about that is that it doesn't matter what's actually happened in your past, because the past isn't the problem. This is what I was saying to my client today. You know, I said to him, if I came to him and said, my problem was caused by an event that happened to me when I was 5, that can't be true. I think there's somebody in the waiting room. That can't be true, because I'm not 5, I'm 59. And even when I was 5, I was experiencing this rather than this. So it means that, you know, we can't change what happened in the past. Sometimes I wish we could, and we can't. But you see, the past isn't the problem, but equally, what's outside of you isn't the problem. The problem in your perception is your internal representation, which we can change. And the problem is actually your memory of the event that happened when you were 5, rather than the actual event. So this is how we can, and somebody asked a question about last week, and I'll come on to that when I get to the Q&A section, about interventions. You know, what can we do to change our projections and therefore change our perceptions? And no, you didn't miss it. We haven't actually got there yet. I think probably we're going to start getting into that maybe next week. There's a hint already. We can use certain NLP techniques. We can use certain timeline therapy techniques. We can use certain hypnosis techniques. We can use certain HUNA techniques to change what we're projecting, and therefore the perception coming back in. As an example, if we looked at emotions here, you know, when I was doing a lot of work with veterans here in the UK, a lot of them had a large amount of unresolved anger and unresolved fear. They projected that anger and they projected that fear out into the world, and then it came back. So their perception was that the world was full of people who had the intention of making them angry. Even to the point where if they went into a bar and there was nobody else there, they'd still find somebody else to pick a fight with. They took their unresolved fear, projected it out into the world, which then led them to have a perception that the world was a scary place. It was full of scary events, and it was full of scary people and people that had an intention of scaring them. Then we used timeline therapy with those veterans. They let go of the anger and the fear inside of them, and in their perception, those people who had the intention of making them angry disappeared. The scary world, the world of scary events and scary people, disappeared. And then you could go, well, you know, how is that possible? How is it that possible for them to just disappear like that? Well, the reason it's possible is because in actual fact, they were never there in the first place. So, you know, in timeline therapy, we let go of the negative emotions. We don't replace them with positive emotions, because in timeline therapy, the belief or the model of the world in timeline therapy is that everyone is naturally a being of light, of peace, joy, love, and happiness. But then what happens is you get negative emotions like anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt laid over the top of those inherent emotions. So we don't need to put anything in its place. When the negative emotions disappear, the emotions that are left are the emotions of peace, joy, happiness, love. And that's then what the person begins to project out into the world. And so then their perception of the world is that the world is a peaceful, loving, happy, joyful place. So this is if we were to relate this to the Taoist tradition, which we talked about in the first session, that's the microcosm and that's the macrocosm. So that's how we can relate all of these things to NLP, which I started to do when I created the presuppositions of NLP 2.0. Was an integration of what we know of NLP, but integrating it also with things like HUNA to create a broader ranging level of presuppositions that would enable people to. Here's an interesting one as well. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. Another place where this actually appears, and I think I've got it. Yeah, this is why I love doing the session from my library. There was a hypnotist by the name of Andre Weitzenhofer. I'm not even sure if he's still alive. He probably isn't. When I first came across him in the 90s, he was already in his 80s. And that's his seminal work. But one of the things that Andre Weitzenhofer said was that the client had the uncanny knack of reading the mind of the hypnotherapist and making the hypnotherapist's beliefs come true. I think I did actually mention that last week, if I remember rightly now. Which means that if you went to see a hypnotherapist to stop smoking, for instance, and the hypnotherapist didn't believe it was possible for people to stop smoking using hypnosis, then the client with that hypnotherapist wouldn't get the result. If they went down the road and they were then with a hypnotherapist who did believe it was possible to have people stop smoking with hypnosis, then even though he might use the same induction, even though he might give exactly the same suggestions, then the client gets the result with hypnotherapist number 2, but not hypnotherapist number 1, because of the projections from the hypnotherapist. Now, the reason why the presuppositions of NLP are so important, and also why I expanded them with the presuppositions of NLP 2.0, is that what that does when we're working with a client, it enables us to project onto the client to maximize the client's success when we're working with them. So it's again a crossover between NLP, crossover between hypnosis. We mentioned Huna last week, and the whole notion of perception is projection. So as I say, later on in the series, we'll be looking at, I guess, my go-to techniques that I use both for myself and also with my clients to enable them to change their projection. And then also, when it's worked when your perception changes. That's the only way that you know that the process or the technique has worked truly, is when your perception of the person, the event, the situation, or circumstances in your perception is different. That's when you know that you successfully changed your projections. So that's our content for this evening. My guess is there's some questions. I'm going to be taking the questions on my iPad. Do I have those already? Okay, great. Okay, so Sinead, this was a question that came in from last week's session. I think so. You got given the linear fashion. I think you actually meant to type the given the non-linear fashion in which projections occur. I don't really understand what I'm meant to do with this. Am I supposed to go around sorting out all the world's problems? That bit was confusing me. Am I responsible for everything in the world that goes wrong? So, Sinead, that's a great question, actually. The only thing that you are responsible for, and the only thing that you can take responsibility for, are your projections. So it's not about taking responsibility for changing the world's problems, because when you look outside of you and you perceive something as a problem, that's actually you. So this concept of perception is projection, I think, gives us a incredible opportunity for self-healing, rather than healing other people or healing up events, situations, circumstances in the world. It's a bit of a paradox, because perception's projection says it's all you, and then says the only thing that you can take any responsibility for is you. John Fielder, how does self-realization affect your internal representations when your perception is that all is one? Good question, John. So we mentioned last week that from an NLP point of view, hypnosis point of view, timeline therapy point of view, we've got the model that we have two minds, conscious mind and unconscious mind. In Huna, we have the concept that we have a third mind, which is our higher self. Now, at the level of higher self, the higher self is perfect. So therefore, its perception of everything and everybody else, including your conscious mind and unconscious mind, is that they're perfect. At the level of higher self, everything is one and everything is infinite. So really, when you work with perception as projection and using it as a tool for personal transformation, then what you're doing is you're working with yourself to evolve yourself. So in Huna, the purpose of a particular life is for your unconscious mind to become a conscious mind. And for your conscious mind to become a higher self. To achieve that, your conscious mind needs to start acting like a higher self to your unconscious mind. And therefore perceive your unconscious mind as being perfect, no matter what it does. But only the higher self is perfect. So a conscious mind isn't perfect. We can get our thinking wrong. Our unconscious mind isn't perfect. Our unconscious mind can and does make mistakes. And when it does, as a higher self, you go, perfect. So with the perception that all is one, that is really what we're saying with perception is projection. We are all one. In fact, in ancient times, the idea of separation, of there being you and me, the idea being that I'm not the river that's flowing outside, the idea that I'm not the trees that I'm looking at over the other side of the river. We're all connected, but now we've got this thing about we're all connected, but being connected also requires that idea of separation. And for a long time, child psychologists had always thought or believed that a little child is just a little wandering unconscious mind. And so the idea of separation, there's me, there's my mum, and there's my dad, didn't exist. The little child, even though they couldn't tell you about it, actually believed that they were their mum and dad. We can now actually demonstrate that to be the case with advances in neuroscience, but that's the way that everyone's unconscious mind works. So the level of higher self, the level of unconscious mind, everything is one. It's only at the level of the conscious mind where the concept of separation comes into play. Dale, right? Thanks. Andre Weisenhower died 2005. I thought he probably would have done. Right, let me have a look. Okay, other questions? Liz why is it I often want to hold on to the negative stuff? Good question, Liz, and also you know, a question that shows a good amount of vulnerability and bravery in saying that. A lot of people would deny it. That would come down to something which in therapy we call secondary gain. In that, and this is again where the unconscious mind makes a mistake. As in, at the level of your unconscious mind, the mistake it makes is they go, well, what you've labeled as negative stuff, as keeping it has a positive intention. Here's an example. So I'm working with a client. We've successfully released anger. We're now working on sadness. And I say to his unconscious mind, is it totally okay with your unconscious mind if you have an undeniable conscious experience of sadness disappearing today? And we got a totally congruent no. So then, and obviously, if it's not okay with your unconscious mind to let that stuff go, no technique on the planet's going to work. So I said, okay, ask your unconscious mind, what's your unconscious mind's purpose in it not being okay to let the sadness go? And he says, protection. Notice immediately that's a positive intention, though it is what we call an NLP and away from, because you've got to go protection from what? So then I said, okay, so ask your unconscious mind, what's its highest intention in you having protection? And he said, safety. Now, again, positive intention, but safety is towards, whereas protection is away from. Still not quite there yet. So I go, okay, so what's your unconscious mind's highest intention in wanting to have safety? So I can be happy. Now, you'll notice already there's a conflict between the highest intention of being happy and not letting the sadness go. So I then said to his unconscious mind, okay, ask your unconscious mind, because I'm a little bit slow with this. Wouldn't you have a lot more happiness, or wouldn't you be a lot more happy if you were to let the sadness go? At which point his unconscious mind gets it and sort of goes, aha. Now that you mention it, I hadn't really thought about it that way before. Yes. So I said, okay, ask your unconscious mind again. Is it now totally okay with your unconscious mind if you have an undeniable conscious experience of the sadness disappearing today? And we got a congruent yes. Then we did the intervention and successfully the sadness disappeared. So that's the cause when our unconscious mind doesn't want to let something go. In the unconscious mind's perception, what you labeled as negative stuff, actually the unconscious mind perceives it has a positive return or positive payback. From iPhone. Wow, that's a great name. I guess if you wrote this question, you'll know where you are. iPhone. If perception is interpreted by experiences and learning, whose reality are we living? The only one you can. Yours. Which is, an interesting one, I think, because, when we think about the NLP presuppositions, like everybody has their own unique model of the world, and respecting each other's models of the world, we can never, no matter how good we get at NLP or hypnosis or hormone therapy or HUNA, we can never know, we can never live somebody else's reality, only ours. Which I think is an important thing to get when we work with people. And again, this produces presupposition of NLP, like a person is not their behavior. We mentioned that last week. A person isn't their behavior. And everybody is doing the best they can with the resources they believe they have available to them. And that includes us as well, right? Which implies forgiveness. Forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others. Talia, in Israel, how does this concept relate to chronic pain and illness? Good question, Talia, and we're going to cover that in a lot more depth on one of the particular sessions. But interestingly, the chronic pain. If you're working with somebody who has phantom limb pain, as in they've had a limb amputated, the limb isn't physically there, and though they feel pain in, let's say, a leg where there is no leg, that is a complete perceptions projection process, and actually a very effective way of treating phantom limb pain is a mirror. Because if you actually have the person stand in front of a mirror and then see the reflection in the mirror that there is no leg, the pain disappears. We'll be looking at that, and I think somebody who's worth reading up with regard to that particular concept is the work of Dr. John Sarno. He wrote a book called Healing Back Pain, but then his last work, Dr. John Sarno died recently, was a book called The Divided Mind, where he said that we were, the world was experiencing a epidemic, his words, epidemic of psychosomatic disease. But we'll talk more about that in detail. Okay, I think I've done all.
Just say it's not.
Oh, have you?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, got it. Okay, so Liz, in response to my answer, yes, what about death then? Okay, not quite understanding the question. I can look at this in a couple of ways. If you're talking about suicide, then that's where you've got somebody with the perception that actually being dead would be better than being alive. It is a perception that people can then change. Also, you know, quite often people say to me, what's dying like? I don't know because I haven't done it yet. But one idea is that death is like falling asleep, because in a way, when you fall asleep, the world that you're in right now dies and then comes back to life the next day. Carmel, how does this work when you have a loved one fighting cancer? Great question, Carmel. So, and again, language. So if you have a perception that someone is fighting cancer, that's your projection. So, you know, from a projection point of view, work around changing the projection of fighting. You know, like, not, you know, as an example, that development of cancer in the body is a totally natural process. It happens in everybody's body all the time. That's not actually the problem. And then also would be around, and we'll talk more about how we can do this when we get into the interventions bit. But Carmel, when I explain this, I know you already know how to do this from the trainings that you've done with me before. Would be to go inside, find the part of you who's the loved one that you're talking about, and then notice if that part of you that's them is totally healed, whole, and magnificent. If in your perception, the part of you that's them isn't totally healed, whole, and magnificent, then the absolute best thing you can do for them and for you is to heal up that part of you that's them. So then your perception in the microcosm is that they're totally healed, whole, and magnificent, which allows them to be outside of you. It doesn't make them totally healed, whole, and magnificent. And it allows them to become totally healed, whole, and magnificent outside of you. So okay, they haven't come through yet. Okay. Is that Michael Devine or Michelle Devine? Michael. Sorry, Michael. Okay, again, I'll tell you what, these people who come on these Zooms ask phenomenal questions. So Michael Devine, can working on perception is projection help our evolution in ways such as that according to spiral dynamics? Yes. So we didn't mention it here because we were looking at it from an NLP point of view rather than values levels point of view. Spiral dynamics was originally based on the work of Clare Graves. That's C-L-A-R-E, the male Clare rather than female Clare. And he postulated that there are a number of values levels that people operated from. And that it was possible for people to evolve through those values levels. So the values that we've put there would actually constitute the values level that you're operating from a spiral dynamics point of view. So you'd project out into the world your values level. So the highest values level that Claire Graves identified was values level 7, which was a first level. It was level of values where the person becomes self-actualized, as in they're on the cause side of the equation, the cause and effect. They moved to a level beyond good and bad, right and wrong, and were able to operate on a level of functionality and flexibility. So rather than it being the right way or the wrong way, good way, the wrong way, it was like, okay, so which way is the most functional? And then being able to be flexible enough to operate from the most functional way. And also the values level 7, it's like it's a I can do what I want to do, provided it doesn't do harm to anyone else. My experience, the absolute best book on Claire Graves's values levels is a book called The Never Ending Quest, which was written by, I'm seeing if I can find it so I can show it to you, but I can't see it for me. Which was published by Chris Cohen and Natasha Todorovich, though they're actually Claire Graves' original unpublished papers. So they put Claire Graves down as the author and themselves as the editors. Chris Cohen also a couple of years ago passed over. Jerry, the role of state shifting, as in stress response versus well-being response in perception, please. Yeah. Good question again. So we've got emotions here. So depending on the state we're in, whether that be sympathetic nervous arousal, relaxation response, will change our perception of the world around us. So one of the quickest things we can do to change our perception is to change our state in the moment. But then if we want to change it, well, and the absolute quickest way of changing our state is to change our physiology. We know that from an NLP point of view. And as soon as we're in parasympathetic nervous arousal, we're in the zone, we're in the flow, we're in the relaxed state, our perception of people, events, situations, and circumstances outside of us will change. If we want to change that long term rather than in the moment, then the thing would be to use interventions from NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and HUNA, which we'll talk about in upcoming weeks. All right, I think I'm. with questions. Where have I got? Oh, there I am. Yeah, see myself in there. So thanks for joining us again this week. Give me a thumbs up if that was useful. Yay! Good. I just like to know that I'm projecting the right thing into the virtual world of Zoom. And you know, we are becoming more and more aware that the world around us is virtual. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw it, but I thought there was a quote from Keanu Reeves about the Matrix trilogy of movies. And he basically said that people got it wrong. The Matrix movies were not movies, they were a documentary. And I think, you know, we're beginning to become more aware of that, and certainly with perceptions projection, we become more aware of it. So thank you so much for joining us. We will be here again, as I say, same bat time, same bat channel. So until then, have a great week ahead. We've got our Huna Intensive starting on Saturday, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then, so we will, in one way, shape, or form, be coming from that Huna Intensive, because Wednesday is the final day of the 5-day Huna Level 1 Intensive. So we'll be in yet another location before bringing you back home again for the Wednesday afterwards. So have a great week, and put any comments or further questions into the Real World NLP and Huna Facebook group, and I'll do my best to be able to answer those questions, etc. Because I'm loving the interaction that we're getting from that group. So see you guys. Bye.